Okay, reminder for inequalities, pay attention to your symbols. Less than or greater than, open circle, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, closed circles. Meaning closed circles means you include. So for the first one, we distribute the -2, so that's why we got -6x. -2 times -1 is +2. It's less than 8. So then you subtract 2 from both sides. So you get -6 is less than 6. You then divide by -6. Remember, you divide by -6. And when you multiply or divide by a negative, the symbol flips. So notice the symbol flipped. So x is greater than -1. So it's an open circle because of the symbol on -1. And you're shading to the right. That's why it's answer B. I'm going to do one similar to this next one. So if I had, for example, 2 times x plus 1 minus 2 is greater than or equal to, let's say, 3x plus 4 times x plus 1. So you simplify on each side first. So I would distribute the 2. So I'd have 2x plus 2 minus 2 greater or equal to 3x, distribute the 4. So we'd have 4x plus 1. Oops, that looks really messy. Let me go back. 3x, let's see, 3x plus 4x plus 4. Okay, then I'm going to simplify on each side first. So the 2 minus 2's cancel. So we'd have 2x is greater than or equal to, combine like terms, so we'd have 7x plus 4. You want to get x's on one side. I'm going to do it a different way just to practice something. So if I subtract 2x from both sides, remember 2x minus 2x is nothing. You have to put a 0 in that spot. Then we'd have 5x plus 4. Now let's say I subtracted 4, so I'd have -4 greater or equal to 5x, and if I divide it by 5, I'd have -4/5 is greater or equal to x. Now be careful when you go to graph. I recommend rewriting it because when you graph, it would be in a closed circle on -4/5, and you're actually shading to the left. X, or the answer is the shading is less than or equal to -4/5. So if you want to rewrite it, put the variable on the left, the number on the right. Since the little pointy part is by the x, the pointy part is by the x. Oh yeah, less than, I'm going to shade to the left. So for number 3, graphing, you distribute the negative, so that's why we got -3x minus 3 is less than or equal to 6. I then add 3 to both sides, so I get -3x is less than or equal to -9, to 9. Then I divide by -3. Remember, when you multiply or divide by negative, the symbol flips. That's why I flipped here. So I got x is greater or equal to 3. Greater or equal to -3. Closed circle, and greater than or equal to is to the right. Now number 4 is similar to one of the other examples I just showed you. Now for compound inequalities, when there's and or, I would write it, I would do 2 different colors. So for example, for this first one, I would do that maybe in green. So let's do that. So we solve them both separately. So I add 3 to both sides. I get 2x is less than 10. We then divide by 2. So we get x is less than 5. Now I'm going to go graph that. So x is less than 5. So if I go graph that, it's an open circle on 5. Less than, I'd be shading to the left. Okay, so I did that in green. Now I would go maybe with blue, or another color, and I'm going to do the other one. So if I subtract 5, I get -x is less than or equal to 3. Then I have to divide by -1, right? We want to isolate x. So the symbol flips, and we get x is greater or equal to -3. So when I graph that, it's going to be a closed circle on -3. Greater than or equal to, I would shade to the right. Now for ands, you're shading what is in common. So the part that's in common is right here, where we have a closed blue circle, because that touches the green as well. And then since it's an open circle on 5, that's not in common for both. but everything in between is. So it would be closed circle on -3, open on 5, and what they have in common is in between. That's where the colors overlap. Now remember, for ors, you graph everything. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we had 2 times x minus 1 plus 4 is less than 3, or 3 minus 2x is less than -5. So I would do this first one on the left. So I distribute, so I get 2x minus 2 plus 4 is less than 3. I would combine like terms, so I'd have 2x plus 2 is less than 3. I would subtract 2, so I would have 2x is less than 1. I would divide by 2, so I'd have x is less than 1/2. I'm going to do the other one in a different color. Now if I solve this one on the right, we would subtract 3, so we'd have -2x is less than -8. If I divide by -2, the symbol flips, so x is greater than 4. For ors, we're graphing everything. It's not what's in common. So I'll do the blue first. X is greater than 4. So on 4, we're going to do an open circle. Greater is to the right. And then for red, since it says x is less than 1/2, we do open circle and to the left. Ors, you graph everything. It's not what's in common. Okay, so for the bar kind, let me give you an example similar to number 1. We first isolate the bar. So let's say we had 2 times absolute value of x minus 3 equals 5. So we would first add 3. So we'd have 2 absolute value of x is equal to 8. We would divide by 2. So you'd have absolute value of x is equal to 4. Once the bars are isolated, then you get 2 new equations or inequalities. So the bars come off. One is everything you see minus the bars. The other, you would flip the symbol, equals stays equals, and you would negate the other side. So those would be our 2 answers for -4. Notice they're not always the same number, and one being positive, one negative. In this example, they are. Okay, so for ones like number 2, Russell wants to buy 3 gift cards and wants to make sure total costs no more than $2 above or below 60. Which of the following inequalities represents the situation? So remember I was telling you guys that when we do this, when we do the setup, it's always going to be x minus our center. In this case, we know it's going to be some kind of inequality symbol. And this number is to the right of your center. So margin of error, number to the right of center, how much more or less you can go. So it says you can go a distance no more than 2 above and below. So that would be the number 2 right there. And they say that the center, your target, that you can go above and below is 60, right? Now, they throw that other number in there though. They say 3. So they're not talking about 1 gift card, they're talking about 3. So that's when we throw that 3 in front of the x. Now it says, which of the following represents the situations? If I want it to be something shaded in between 2 values, we know it's going to have to be one of these symbols, the less than, or equal to, because those are ands, conjunction and in between. So you want to say, can I include the upper number? You can, because you're saying it's allowed to go up to, no more than $2 above, so it'd be less than or equal to. Okay, let's not do number 3, but let's do one similar. So let's say I had 3 times x plus 4 minus 6 is equal to 3. So first you want to isolate the absolute value bars. So we would add 6 first. So then we would have 3 absolute value of x plus 4 is equal to 9. Then we would divide by 3. So we'd have absolute value of x plus 4 is equal to 3. Now we then take the bars off and create our 2 new equations. So the first one is going to be x plus 4 equals 3. The next one is x plus 4 equals negative 3. And when we solve the left one, we would get x equals negative 1. When we solve the other, by subtracting 4, we would get x equals negative 7. Okay, notice for number 5 that it's an absolute value inequality. So let me walk you through this again. So we need to isolate the bars. So think of the bars like a plain old x, right? So you don't break it. You need to first isolate the bar. So we subtract 9 from both sides. We have negative absolute value of x minus 2 is greater than negative 3. When we divide by negative 1, the symbol flips. So we have absolute value of x minus 2. You flip the symbol, is less than 3. Now that the bars are isolated, that is when you determine if it's and or. That is when the bars come off. So we have to look at the symbol. Less than is going to be an and. So if we graph, we're shading what's in common. The first is everything you see. The first is everything you see. The first is everything you see minus the bars. So it's x minus 2 is less than 3, and x minus 2, we have to flip the symbol, and we negate the other side. So we have that. Now we solve both. So we had 2. So we have x is less than 5. Add 2. X is greater than negative 1. Now you have to shade them, graph them, and shade what's in common. So I'm going to do the left one in green. So x is less than 5. So if I have 5 here, less than 5, I'd be shading this way, open circle into the left. If then the other one in blue, says x is greater than negative 1, we have an open circle on negative 1, and we're shading to the right. The part that overlaps is where the green and blue meet. So our picture would look like this. Open circle on negative 1 and 5, and we'd shade in between. Don't forget that tomorrow Miss Hinton Mason will be in the guidance office at 8 a.m. if you would like to come in for extra practice. Again, tomorrow morning on Monday, Mrs. Hinton Mason will be in the guidance office at 8 a.m. if you would like to practice in one of the conference rooms. You can ask the people in there where she is if you can't find her.